Hey, just wanted to make a video on something that kind of happened to me. First off, let's talk about a video from a guy called Luke Smith that I watched. He talked about a book called Consciousness in the Bicameral Mind. And in that book, it basically explained that people in the past, or at least hypothesized that people in the past, around the Bronze Age, were not conscious in the way that we think of consciousness. They had like their hemispheres were different in the way that the right was more for action and actually carrying out things, and the left was more of a conscience. It's more something that was to direct action, morally speaking. And due to certain things that we've done, we've decreased in symmetry across the lines, blurring the differences between these two things. Uh, which is it would explain why a lot of times people in the past, the things that they did, things that they thought are just completely different to how we think and how we process things. Especially because people now a lot of times are atheists, they think of things as like very scientific stuff like that, very very different type of structure. Uh, but it also comes into the it also factors in the fact that people are physically less capable. They are physically less able to do things. Their body has much less symmetry. They're much less in tune with the parts of their mind that are not completely at the frontal lobes. The part of their minds that controls motor movement, that controls the more automatic functions of the body and stuff like that. And it would make a lot of sense, especially with the experience that I've had. Around 2020, dropped out of college, was pretty depressed, didn't have a good family life, and had a bit of some health issues. Felt like had lymphadenopathy, or what I thought at the time was lymphadenopathy, because that was the diagnosis. Things were fluid was pouring down my legs. My hips felt weird. I couldn't really lift because I was at UPS at the time, and just had to quit. Had no money. Still had an internship, but it was like I was being paid every 2 weeks. I was very, very depressed at that time. And then I started to fall into something called the black pill, something where the way that they see the world is as everything is genetic. But I wasn't really like in the depths of it. I was into something called look smashing. It's very dumb. One thing that I did is that I would hit myself in the face to try to make my bone structure look better. But I tried to I tried to mew, which is basically putting your tongue on the roof of your mouth to try to force the bone structure to come out. And that wasn't really putting enough force. And then I just kind of experimented with other things, and I realized, oh yeah, if I just like use my rib cage, I could be able to put more pressure. I started doing stomach vacuums because I wanted to have a bit better of a chest with a smaller stomach and smaller waist, and it actually worked until it didn't. The thing about a vacuum is that it sucks things down. Normally, that wouldn't be that much of a problem, as it kind of worked for a while. It actually helped me raise a little bit my center of gravity, kind of make my torso longer, and I was a very leg dominant person. Kind of gave me like an inch in height, and I didn't really see much. I didn't know if it was really just like that in combination with the fact that I was still growing at 19, but I didn't really I didn't really question the things until things started going bad, and they were much worse than any of the good that came from it. Uh, I had an asymmetry since about 4 years old, caused likely by asthma and sedentary lifestyle because I had to just sit down and just let things pass me by a lot of times. Uh, and that basically made my left side a little bit longer, my left arm a little bit longer, my left eye uh, a little bit up, and gave me a slight asymmetry that I didn't really think much about, as it actually kind of helped me in basketball because I would just use my left hand to be able to knock people's dribbles out or whatever. But this came back to bite me pretty badly, and I actually had a lot of things that now I would consider ego deaths, because like a lot of times in ancient literature, people or ancient stories, uh, figures would they would basically melt and be reformed, and have their bodies come back as something likely stronger. It was usually something that would happen in battle. You can see this in Osiris. I don't think it would be. They mentioned melting, but he came back. Uh, and you can see this. Funny enough, like I actually looked into I actually saw this a lot more in anime, like Luffy with Gear Fifth, stuff like that. He melted, came back. Baki with what's it called? Before the father son fight, he melted, came back. Not really that much of an anime fan anymore, based on what I know about the roots in Hinduism, as you're gonna see later. But this is not good. I was not really coming back right, because I basically, there's something in my body that was basically impure. It was basically impure. And the way that I was acting, it wasn't like I was physically doing anything. I wasn't toiling. I wasn't doing anything. I was just sitting around, just trying to be able to correct this, not really physically working or anything like that. And my body was consolidating what I would think now is like stem cells to try to recreate symmetry, especially. But I was disrupting that process, and this affected me physically in my body, in my hips. I literally couldn't really chew. I couldn't really poop, especially at that time, which wasn't even the worst of it. I would occasionally wake up uh, on the ground, or just like wake up on the ground uh, in like brain matter, or what I thought it was, and it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. I went to a mental hospital uh, shortly after that, ECMC, and I basically I basically was pretty bad for about 2 years. And I just decided, yeah, I'm just not gonna go. I'm just gonna refuse to engage with any of this stuff, because they kind of just like they when you're a hammer, everything is a nail. They only saw, oh yeah, like he's not making sense to me, so I'm a doctor, I'm smarter than him, I am the epitome of I'm the epitome of a medical science in of the human body. So he can't be right, and I can't this can't be something I don't know about, so it's obviously mental. And then I started to feel a bit better, but I still had a lot of bad things going on with my body. I didn't really feel good when I slept. I would kind of avoid it. I I kind of had like an aura of I kind of had an aura of death, and I kind of realize now like how this can factor into a lot of things. Like I tried to talk to Aiden Mattis about missing 401. Didn't Wasn't really interested. He didn't really see the connection, but I can understand how this could factor into people like turning into something called like a skinwalker, someone changing form and things like that, and changing form, especially through immense body control. And a lot of times, people don't really realize that there are muscles across the whole body that they don't even really notice. They don't really notice that could actually change the crucial areas of the body, like the knees, the hips, facial muscles that people just don't use, or they just can't use because like they don't really have much motor control and stuff like that. And because they can't do it, they don't see other people being able to do it, and they just like ridicule other people being able to do it, stuff like that. And then eventually, I was drawn to the church. I ended up catching myself watching videos from Wendigoon, from a lot of people, Bible stuff like that, and it started to just intuitively make sense for me. And I started to I started to actually go to church. Uh, but shortly before that, I started to do the thing that I did again. Not really any stomach vacuums, but more or less just kind of focusing on like body symmetry and stuff like that through more isometric training, just kind of flexing muscles I didn't really use before, stuff like that. And I saw a review of the Book of Five Rings, and Miyomu Musashi talks about how to stand as a man, especially to brace for impact when you're gonna clash swords with someone, when you're gonna try to murder someone with swords. And I realized, oh yeah, like what he's saying, it makes a lot more sense than what I was doing. It makes sense because he had a lot more understanding of the human body, and he had a lot more he had a lot more tested theory, especially because he actually used to kill people and win in duels in mutual combat. And I just started to do that, and that actually helped me a lot uh, at the time. And it gave me like a surge of ability to explain myself, a surge of ability to not just move better, but actually use my mind better. And it wasn't really just like the more cerebral parts of my mind. It was more intuitive knowledge and being able to see links between things, and links between things that didn't really make sense to me before. I couldn't tie ties. I couldn't see linking threads a lot of time. And then I just kind of wandered a bit more into Hinduism and things like that, because that kind of made sense to me, and especially because it kind of fed into my more arrogant beliefs, like, oh yeah, I could like more or less become like a god or something like that. That's what I thought. And then I kind of went to church because I was drawn to that. I didn't really know why. I just thought they were wrong. I was pretty arrogant about that. I was trying to be able to change them into like, I don't, I don't know, I was trying to convert them into Hindus or something like that. And then I was taken aback when I felt the Holy Spirit. I felt I felt things in me that were changing, and I realized then that like I still was pretty imperfect physically. I was improved from before, but I just kind of got used to the pain, got used to the things that I did to myself that made me just not notice that not just spiritually but physically I was still incomplete, but the spiritual was way more important. And then I basically I basically tried to be a Christian for a while, and then I kind of realized that, oh yeah, this is actually pretty hard. I'm just gonna go back to like I'm just gonna try to. I think this is fake, and I try to make excuses like, oh yeah, I'm from like a more hunter gatherer culture, as if God is not universal, and like, oh yeah, this doesn't make sense for me because like this is from like an agrarian culture, and uh, I was kind of anti-agriculture because like I thought that was one of the things uh, that was one of the things that that was I didn't really see like the fact that we had to do agriculture specifically because of original sin, but I thought that, oh yeah, we had original that I thought that I had a very convoluted idea of the order of things. I thought that agriculture was the problem, and we did that to go away from a harder living in a more hunter gatherer society, and that it was weakness. But I kind of realized that it's more the opposite. The reason why people went to hunter gatherer society is specifically because they they didn't really want to work. They didn't really want to work the land. In a lot of places, they didn't have that opportunity to work the land, and it was more from the fact that it's more of an imperfect state of man. It's more of an imperfect state of man. You can see this a lot of time in the morality of like pagans and stuff like that that are closer to the hunt, and that they don't really have to sow or reap anything. And and but I was still pretty bent on going to a more pre-axial age religion, something like Hinduism, Buddhism, stuff like that. Because I was pretty arrogant. I thought I could just like just like subvert the order of things, order of man compared to God. Uh, and then I had an experience where I spoke in tongues, and it was not good tongues. I saw Jesus fall off the wall with the witness, with my dad as a witness. Just kind of ignored that, and there was knocking in my house specifically, slamming specifically, usually three times after that, and I realized, yeah, it's obvious that I was wrong, and not just wrong, but being wrong in this way had consequences. Uh, Especially because I was basically just forsaking like the gift that God gave me that not everyone would be able to get. Not everyone not everyone would be able to be forgiven, and not just be forgiven, but be made whole spiritually and physically. And I was just throwing that away. Absolutely. And it was very disrespectful. And I basically just started to go back to church, still have a lot of issues, stuff like that. But this made me understand a lot of things physically. And the fact that I was basically doing Kundalini yoga. And the thing about Kundalini yoga is that there's a reason why it's associated with the snake, with the serpent. It's pretty literal, and it made a lot of sense, especially because like a friend saw me doing what I was doing, and he had some of the same symptoms but way worse because he had no understanding of like what the fact that I was doing what I was doing so habitually to try to make myself whole. And he had my symptoms were worse. Like he would just wake up outside naked. He had no recollection of how he did that because he didn't like clothes. I didn't like clothes either because clothes were restricting me physically, and it felt like my body wasn't really articulating itself, putting itself into formation well. And I would just like be in my room naked. Specifically, I was trying to stay away from people, and I was and like it was pretty comical, especially times like when people try to check up on me and they would be angry. I'm like, bro, I'm in my room. Like I'm suffering way more than you guys, but it felt pretty bad. And he got sent to Africa because his parents didn't know how to deal with him. And he's still going through some things to this day. He's pretty coherent, but he's still going through things to this day. And the point of this is to talk about symmetry, to talk about the Holy Spirit and things like that, and the fact that it's pretty literal, especially because the Holy Spirit is basically is the interceder. Is basically the thing that's supposed to make us whole spiritually and physically. And a lot of the times, the physical changes, especially in the past, that could do to people, it's not just for your heart. It's for the fact that you might have to actually do war. It's like there's a part of Christendom that is martyring, that is being martyred, but you don't just be martyred. There's a lot of times where it's like, yeah, you can't just be martyred. There's a lot of people, like let's say there's an army of people that are like from Sodom and Gomorrah. You can't just be captured. You can't just be captured. You can't just be martyred and let people take your sons and stuff like that. You cannot let that happen. And you can see this a lot of times in how God empowers people physically, and physically in the Bible, and especially because He wants to be able to show acts of things that would not make sense to people, physical feats, stuff like that, to make people believe things like David and Goliath. But before that was before the Holy Spirit. But because a lot of times Christendom is really at a state of war with the world, and like a lot of times like you want to be peaceful, but it's not always an option. It's not always an option, and this is specifically to give you the mental and physical abilities to carry out God's will, uh, and things like that. And part of the reason a lot of time that atheists, especially people that are pretty, not even like strong atheists, that are pretty weak atheists and stuff like that, there's like, oh yeah, I just weakly believe. They don't really have symmetry of body or mind. They're never really people that are like, oh yeah, like I examined God, I examined the things that Christians did, and I'm like, yeah, it's not sufficient. God would like, this is just man's ability. And a lot of times, like, it makes no sense when you actually look at it. Like, okay, they these people are wrong, but they pretty much had the most success combat wise in the most competitive side of history because they were the ones making it the most competitive. They had the best art, best morality, specifically when you look at the fact that most of the best legal systems are Christian, uh, and pretty much best ability to actually influence the physical world, like by or discover things about the physical world through science and stuff like that. And this is pretty much just a fraction of God's ability and stuff like that. And Christians haven't even been acting right well enough to really harness it fully. We're still human beings. We're still sinners. But regardless of that, you can actually see the physical the differences between them. A lot of times, the difference between someone that has faith, the difference between someone that actually is excited about the fact that they know that Jesus died for their sins and that they have a chance for redemption. And you can see this a lot of times in the eyes and the face, because like that's eyes in the face. One thing I notice a lot of times about just people nowadays, they're kind of like zombies a lot more. They're pretty, they're kind of spiritless. They're kind of automatons, just being operated, and that's kind of that comes from the fact that they don't really act on the world. They don't really. It's not really a dialectic between them and God and stuff like that, and it's really just like a negative cycle. And this is one thing that I kind of realize a lot of times through when I was in the more Buddhist phase. I only saw it as like negative cycles of reproduction and positive cycles of reproduction. And the thing about positive cycles of reproduction, you have kids in a marriage. You have kids in a marriage. You do good things to other people. You trust. You create. You take what you are given and you make it 10 times fold. And and when and you see this with people that are in negative cycles of reproduction. You they something bad happens to them, or they engage, and then they see an incomplete version of the world, and they kind of like Cain. He invited sin into his house like a predatory cat. They take the it was a choice on Cain's part. Like they could just go the other way and be like, oh, I want to do this I want to do good because I saw it bad. But no, they want to do bad, and not just bad, but the most evil things. Like a very visceral uh, a very visceral example is guys in prison. I looked up Sean Atwood. Uh, I looked at Sean Atwood and what the Aryan Brotherhood and people like that were doing in prison to young men, and they were taking glee in what they were doing, and they were getting stronger and devoting themselves entirely to doing that. That was the only thing they thought about. Only it can consume their entire being, and just the way that a righteous, good man sees sees enacting God's will as what consumes them entirely. Same goes for someone that is evil, and not just evil, but like evil to a supernatural degree that does not make sense to people that are in the middle of the road. And when you and people that experience that, they get confused a lot of times. They get confused, like, how can this be? I was taught people are good. I was taught this and this. And reality is, man's heart is wicked, and realistically the only thing that would stop that is God, or just like being weakened by the world in a way that you can't really enact that wickedness. And people that are not really, that are in the middle of the road, they're like, oh yeah, I'm not like that good, that bad. It's really just that it's really, they don't really have the opportunity or really the willpower, energy to really do those things. And another example is like predators of children. And you can see this a lot of times in how they say, oh, I was born this way. No, no, no. You saw something that either something happened to you, or at some point you were you were exposed to something, and it sparked something in you. And instead of running away from that, you went a little bit farther. You went a little bit farther. You went a little bit farther until you get found out, and then you get victimized. You get victimized by the justice system. You're in prison, and they don't like people like that. And they say, "Oh no, I'm a victim. I'm a victim." And you can see this a lot of times in how Satan, he acted in arrogance, and instead of really repenting or feeling sad, he acted like he was a victim. He acted like God wronged him. He acted like he did not want redemption. He acted like he was the one in the right, and that he was just victim of circumstance. And then he used that to then justify doing what he did later, doing everything he did later. And the thing is about good and the positive cycles of reproduction and the negative cycles of reproduction is that it's really not like anything to do with humans. Humans are really the conduits, but they choose to allow these things to come into them. And it's much harder to allow the Holy Spirit to really fully envelop in you, to really take hold of you and become a righteous, strong man that can do amazing things that don't make sense conventionally. And that's it. But the easier side to do is just allow yourself to be completely taken by Satan, because Satan will take anyone. He's not discerning. He does not care. He is not discerning. God specifically, the reason why he values free will is because he wants worship to be perfect. He wants worshiping him is a privilege, specifically because you're with perfection. It's like you're not doing him a favor. He's doing you a favor. And that's one thing I see a lot of times with how people view atheists, atheists view God and stuff like that. And they'll be like, "Oh yeah, Satan's better." It's like, "Oh, Satan, he has no standards." Why do you think he has no standards? It's because he does not want he what he wants is really not something that requires anything that would entail standards. What he wants to do to you is basically just beat you up and defile you and torture you because you are made in the image of God. And he's going to basically do that to try to pretend like he's doing that to God because he's weak. He's weak, at least compared to God. He's much stronger than us, much smarter than us, based on the fact that he deceived me, based on the fact that I almost got caught lacking by that, and all that enlightenment ideas and stuff like that. And the fact that like my ability to speak, my ability to portray that, and my ability to understand these things and see these links was increased from the state that I was in a when I was in that mental hospital, when I was barely able to articulate anything, uh, anything past the body and stuff like that. That was by design. It was basically designed to make me arrogant, to make me stray from God, so I could be, in a place where there's no escape. And this is something that made me realize a lot of things about ancient literature, about the Bible, about the reality of the universe and stuff like that. And I hope that this is useful. I'm gonna make more videos. Probably just gonna do some Bible studies and stuff like that. If you guys are interested, just tell me, and maybe we can have this discussion and stuff like that. I'm gonna put my email and stuff like that in the link. Find places to talk to me. Bye.